I don't know if officers want to come in, or should I just carry on?
Carry on.
Yep. Okay. And then you said about hoops, that, you know, some people said that they feel that there's hoops for them to jump through to get things done. But that is just the way it has to be, really. I know that over the years, the hoops have got better, less challenging, maybe that's a way to put it, in comparison to the previous cycle. We've learned from people saying that actually, you know, it's a bit difficult, so we've streamlined it slightly. But as Rita said, when we went to audit, these were things that were identified, and to enable us to get our green ticks and a fully green slate from audit, there were things that we had to put in place to ensure that the money was being used effectively and that there's proper safeguarding and monitoring, etc., in place. And we also mentioned about equalities and people being time poor, and that they may not be able to participate in the way they may like to. But that's the beauty of people power places, that people can participate in all different ways. They can be working group members, they can just vote, they can come along to the meetings to hear what's happening in their community. There's all different ways that people can get involved. And with the next cycle, if we're lucky enough to continue with another one, there are different ways that people can get involved, and there were plans, as I'm sure you may have read within the paper, about example, alumni and ways that people can get involved in different ways, because, you know, some people just don't want to put projects forward. Some people just want to see their neighbourhoods becoming a better place. It's not a sacred cow. I've just got sacred cow there. I think that was Rita. No. Sorry, no. I think it was Rita that mentioned. Councillor Cheddar mentioned about sacred cows. I was scribbling. I was trying to get it down. Just for the record, Chair, Councillor Cheddar is not a sacred cow. It's just a cow, not a sacred cow. I'm joking. But yeah, it's not a sacred cow. You know, I know that the mayor said that. You know, you quoted the mayor saying that. What was it? I should know because it's said enough, isn't it? That, you know, we're in different times, which is fine. But I think on this one, this is the opportunity for residents and for the voluntary sector and residents and young people to actually make a change themselves, to identify something and to make changes. I mean, I think that if it was from general funds, and I know that all money is still money that could be spent on something else, I would completely understand that. I mean, the NTIL part, you think it's over 4 million currently, and it grows, you know, as developments happen, it increases. So there's nothing to say that, you know, it could be used for something else in addition. But, you know, it's not a sacred cow, but it is something that I think the community values as an opportunity for them to be more involved. Yeah.
I need to bring the questions now. You finished with your induction?
Yes, okay. Yes. I was just responding to them.
Okay, I need to bring the question.
You said I've got half an hour, Chair.
No, everything.
Oh, okay.
Up to 7.
Oh, well, you should.
But the questions in. We don't have that luxury in scrutiny. But I've seen Garfield and Charter.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, before People Power Places was implemented and its predecessor that had a different name, which I've forgotten, how was SIL money spent by the council? What was the process by which these other projects were implemented?
The neighbourhood element of SIL, I don't believe it was spent. It just accumulated. Yeah. So it was changed in, I think, after the Democracy Commission, when it was that actually the amount taken from SIL is increased. So it was 15% and now it's 20% of the SIL money is into the neighbourhood SIL part.
Given the number of years that it had accumulated for, I imagine, and so I ask, was there a study done into how the council could spend that money most efficiently to deliver the most value for residents?
I believe that planning colleagues, in line with legislation, have determined how that money can be spent. I don't know if Officer would want to add anything.
Presumably you would have made a decision to spend it this way rather than another few options that might have been established at the time. You're nodding, Mohammed.
Well, at the time, there was no distinct, from my understanding, no distinct way of spending NSIL in the way that it was done previously. And I think that it evolved at the back of this administration's aspirations around people power, and trying to address some of the negativities around people not feeling engaged. So this was a vehicle that addressed certain issues that this administration saw around being in the heart of everything we do at a time, and moving on to building a fairer Newham. So the concept around it was about increasing participation, increasing civic involvement, and it kind of evolved from a literative process around having community assemblies, citizen assemblies, and then mature programme that we've got at the moment.
So given that aspiration, were no other options of ways to spend the money explored?
Back in 2018? Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was decided from the output, regardless of a comparative study with other, perhaps more efficient ways of expenditure.
But it grew over time.
Okay.
And so it grew over time, and it was done in a phased approach, a considered phased approach, where the amount of money was far smaller than it is now. And we used that process to learn, and it grew from 200,000 to 800,000 to where we are now. So we used those different stages to actually evolve and learn, and we had independent evaluators, to kind of look at the programme. Hence, the Democracy Commission came in and recommended that it should be scaled up.
Thank you. Chair, I think perhaps what the committee might be missing, and which would probably benefit the council, is essentially an efficiency graph, an efficiency arrow of how much money goes into the scheme, including officer hours and officer time in setting up these assemblies and establishing these meetings and staffing them. And then the end of the efficiency arrow, how much of the money is spent on actual projects. Because I suppose my presumption, having participated, is that a great deal of the arrow falls off in administering this scheme. And the argument that it was established for democracy, as opposed to because there was a study that this was the most efficient way of spending the money, perhaps is why we might be where we are at this present time.
Thank you. Councillor Charter, then Masters. Then,
can I just ask a point of clarification before we just move on? So, sorry, Councillor Garfield, are you saying in terms of the measurer, in terms of how we measure the impact and the effectiveness and value for money for this piece, is that will aid, or is the committee opting for it now? Actual
pounds spent, if it's determined by a People Power Place initiative and meeting over the course of the year, to spend the money on a community garden, if 20 grand is spent on the garden, how many more pounds did it take to get to that decision? Through officer hours, venue hire, and all the effort that goes into it.
thank you. So I've noticed Charter, Masters, Hudson, in that order. Yeah, that's the Charter.
So just kind of following up on the finance questions, I think what Councillor Garfield has just highlighted is fundamental to the discussion, which is about you've got librarians pretty much, or library staff, fronting a lot of this work. Is that right?
No. Not library staff.
Not library
seniors.
staff?
It's the neighbourhood officers.
Okay, neighbourhood officers.
Yeah.
Right.
So part of their role is about engagement.
And are they funded 100% from NSIL?
No.
So there's actually more money that the council's using. How are those posts funded?
This is just part of their core work.
Right.
So PPP is just another bit of what they do.
Okay.
It's not the entirety
So
of what those
the full
officers
cost
do.
of NSIL, the full cost of PPP is the 1.6, which is your NSIL money, is that right?
Yeah.
Plus whatever we're putting in to staffing.
There are 2 officers that are dedicated to the programme. The other officers, it's part of their job role, but it's used as an engagement tool. So so I wouldn't quite
It's still
allocate
costing us. It's still costing us, whichever way we wrap it. So one of the challenges for this is, and perhaps it wouldn't have come to a calling if we'd been able to see the full unpacking of the finances. It's not just the end product. It is the process, as Councillor Garfield said, up to that, leading up to that. A couple of other quick points as well. In October 2024, the Finance Review recommended that you have greater alignment to council priority deliveries. Did the team do anything about that? Did you look at, that's a cue or that's a prompt, isn't it? Is it not to actually look at alternative mechanisms of efficiency of delivery? Did anybody take up that challenge of looking at it? Or actually looking at your faces?
No, I'm just trying to absorb the question. So the local priorities were aligned to the corporate priorities. Yeah. So the corporate priorities were set out as a framework, and the local assemblies or people power places were able, from the menu of the priorities that set out corporately, to come up with their projects and vote for their most important priorities for their locality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's not real participatory budgeting then, is it? Because real participatory budgeting, when you look at it around the globe, is a blank envelope. It's human-centred design. You've already aligned with certain levels of council priorities. The real nub of the question is, are we losing efficiencies and are we wasting time, money and resources, and the resources of residents, by going through this long, elongated, creative approach at a time when maybe we can't spend that? You could do the same thing in a very different way, couldn't you? And I'm just a little bit interested to understand why have you settled on this method? Since 2018, you've been going around kind of evolving this, but have you stopped at any point to look at what this is? And we'll just also add to that. At several points, you've said in the papers that this has been internationally acclaimed. But I will point out that on one place, you've said that, one of your cheerleaders is Go Vocal. Yeah? Who run Newham Create, which I presume is a platform that doesn't come free.
There is an administration fee for that platform.
Can I just encourage you, and I think this is symptomatic across the council, that we don't mark our own homework, and that if people have kind of said we're good at something, we actually interrogate the source to that. But going back to the original question, why not look at alternative methods? Why are we so stuck in this rut to say we will not look elsewhere?
Well, can I?
Yeah.
I'll say something, and then
Yeah.
Charlene, you may want to. So I do think it is participatory budgeting. The corporate plan creates a framing for it, but then from that point, it's a very genuine conversation about what matters to people. And having sat in those conversations in neighbourhoods, I think that's a very open conversation, and the journey that people go through this process is very much a journey of participating collectively in that decision-making process. I think the commitment to this kind of process is, and I guess it goes for me back to the challenge that you made at the beginning, Councillor Masters, which is about the strategic nature of it. And I think there are different things you can do with strategic intent. And the strategic intent here is about involving the community in decision making, and that's the primary outcome that's being focused on being delivered, and the participatory budgeting being the mechanism for doing that. So that's why this has. There are lots of other things we do with other strategic purpose, but the reason this is done is that's the primary strategic purpose.
To increase democracy, to increase engagement.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I'll just put, this will be my final comments at this stage. I will say, I'll push back again on this notion that this is purely participatory budgeting, because an annual charity that wasn't linked to therapeutic outcomes would not qualify under this programme. if it wasn't linked to some sort of environmental or therapeutic outcome, it would not be able to get any money from this programme.
If its work wasn't within the parameters of the corporate plan.
So
priorities.
in which case, that's not participatory budgeting, because you haven't got the freedom to express exactly what you want. It's contained within corporate priorities. And I think we need to move away. There's nothing wrong with being aligned to corporate priorities. We would actually encourage that as a safeguard. But the point is, we've got two narratives here. One running that said, this is happy and this is everybody's welcome and stuff. But it's not quite like that. You've only got 2% of the population voting in these outcomes. Yeah. The actual engagement rate is really low. And I think, I'm sure as a committee, we probably have some recommendations on how you can keep the intent, but you can actually deliver this a lot more efficiently and a lot more effectively. But I think it takes a commitment to actually be prepared to be bold, to be courageous and change the narrative and say, times evolve. We're in a very different world from 2018.
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
I think I wanted to come back on the description that Councillor McLean gave of neighbourhood still and ways it could be spent, because I think it perfectly illustrates one of the weaknesses of the current model and an issue that was brought to me by a resident that probably ended up me sort of being on the committee off the back of it. My resident really cared about the neighbourhood she lived in. She wanted to have the local park refurbished, and her argument was, if we've got all these people in temporary accommodation with children, they need decent parks. All she wanted was that park refurbished. Now, a little pot of £5,000 is not going to get you very far. But if residents have been offered a much bigger choice, like taking that whole £200,000 pot and saying, OK, we could refurbish Central Park with that, or we could do something totally different with it, but big things that are very, very visual to the residents, and they immediately know whether it's something they want or not. They can vote with it. And then in terms of actually delivering, there would be ways for residents to be involved as volunteers. Yes, there is. I mean, what I'm saying is, this is another way of doing things that would be so much more strategic, but would still be looking at what residents want to see in their own neighbourhoods. It's just giving one example and why at the moment it fails for so many of my residents.
Who's going to comment? It sounds like a comment.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah.
Okay,
but I take on board Councillor Masters' comments.
Councillor Lee Parkway.
Sorry.
Okay, you can go before.
No, you go.
No, you can go before.
No, you go. Men first.
No.
You waited. Go on, come on, go.
Yes.
Come on.
So it's a shame you can't read, Chair.
I won't laugh.
You did laugh.
No, I've been told no frivolity. I've got a couple of questions. The first question is on section 8.1.4, which is small page 15, big page 25. I just want to check whether that statement is accurate.
Referring to the cabinet.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get the.
It's on the financial implications of the report.
Yeah, I assumed that it was.
Be carried.
The sort of the silence told me that.
I don't want to read the financial implications.
No, I think we need additional paper. There we go.
I just want to know if it's accurate.
Okay.
It's a fairly broad question at the moment. Do you want to clarify part of it that you think is not accurate?
No. I just, the question I'm asking is that in Appendix B, options, savings options, it was about the substitution principle for SIL. That's what that says to me.
I'm really not trying to be unhelpful, but I'm just not quite clear what the question is. I've heard it is 8.1.
Right.
Accurate.
I've got three bits.
I assume you think it's not.
That bit, no, it is. I think it is accurate, and I'm saying that what this says is that as part of the budget strategy, you were looking at the use of SIL as a substitution for actual spend taking place within the council. And then the next question I was going to have is on Appendix C, it has a list of schemes that you can spend seal on, which is in your, I haven't read the whole budget, but I just happened to quickly go through it. But I'm not that sad to read that thing. And then my final question is, are there any items that you have in your budget that the 1.6 million can be used as a substitution for?
No, I see where you're going now. So just to clarify the report, the timing of it matters. Obviously, this report was taken before the report on the budget, and therefore the financial implications had to consider the possibility that in the budget this proposal might not be agreed, and therefore it was setting out, if you like, this was sort of setting out what would happen if the budget was agreed as was currently drafted at that point, and that's why 8.14 contains what I suppose with hindsight looks like an ambiguity but was relevant at the time. So that answers that first part of the question.
Right, yes, okay.
And then on the second part, it is of course the case. The council could choose not to do this. You could choose all sorts of things, can't you? And to use the money for something else. If you chose to use it for something that was already provided for elsewhere in the budget, then it would reduce the cost of that, and therefore there would be a saving to the council. So I'm sure this example isn't correct in fact, but if you just take it as an illustration, we know that there is considerable capital spend on the council's roads each year. If it was permissible to use ENSIL for that, I'm sure it's not, but if you just take it as the illustrative point, then of course you could do that. That would cut the council's borrowing costs and therefore represent a direct saving to the council. Provided you could identify other schemes that were already within the council's budget to which ENSIL could be applied, then yes, what you're saying is absolutely the case. There would be an alternative not to do this, to use the funding for those schemes instead, and therefore cut costs that way. Yes, that's factually true. That's what financial implications say. Apologies for delaying.
That's okay. That's okay. And so my final part of the question is, I mean, I haven't read I will at some point over a large bar of chocolate to get me through it. But are there any items which are included there that the substitution principle can be applied for the 1.6 million?
I mean, you would need to be careful about the sort of specific terms of ENSIL, but my understanding is that that's sort of, kind of fairly broadly drawn. And so, it is, I would assume, highly likely that there would be alternatives to do that. Obviously, there is then a choice as to whether or not one would do so. I know that colleagues have done some work sort of looking at options in there. I'm not sure we have planning colleagues in the room, but I mean, the essential point you're making is correct. Yes, that is a viable option, subject to confirming detail about the application of ENSIL.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Right, and is Councillor McLean?
I'll just add to that I'm not saying that comment's completely wrong, but you remember that this is from the ENSIL. So seal monies can be used in all sorts of different ways without not as many restrictions as ENSIL. So it says in the guidance or in statute or whatever you want to say that you have to consult upon the use of the money. So we could plug a gap, but we couldn't just say, okay, well there's something here and it's 1.6 million, we can use that for that. It have to go through a meaningful consultation. And I mean, I can quote the actual lines to you, but it does say that it sets a high bar for transparency and engagement in its investment considerations to a growth and development. So you have to, so it's in legislation that you have to have a proper consultation on it. So, but planning colleagues could obviously explain it better than myself because it's not really mine. Okay, that's
right. Thank you. And now, Councillor Lee Parkwest.
Sorry.
Chief Exec wants to come in.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chief Exec, but we're looking at the time now.
Come on.
I need to make this point. I'm sorry, just because the difference between ENSIL and the Chief Exec. So it's okay. I don't cut you off in meeting, but I'll take it. But in relation to that, it's just it's just to make a clarification point. So in the budget in C7, you will see that there is some work around savings and optimisation of neighbourhood seal, in particular from 26-27 and 27-28. That if approved, it will be looking at this bit in terms of and in consultation with residents. So it's just not to miss that point. But in relation to, there is a significant difference between how neighbourhood seal should be used and how high-level strategic seal is used and applied. I'll keep it that brief.
And that comment wasn't meant to cut you off. It's just that I said it just when you were about to speak, because we only have less than 15 minutes now. Until Lee Parkway.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question regarding why we've adopted the direct democracy approach of residents when we have an elected representative democracy. And is this because we don't trust elected members to make the decisions for residents about things that matter to them? So, for example, £20,000 being spent on a garden that's been delivered via residents through a prolonged process that's costing the council officers. Why cannot that money be spent in the elected process that we have already got, and a elected member make that decision with the same 20 grand and get that done? Why have we got two systems? Well, we haven't really, have we? Because the elected members have been pushed out of that process.
I think that's one for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that elected members haven't been pushed out of the process, as you have been very involved in the process. You've been part of it from the beginning. You've been part of the working group. I think I'll go back to the whole consultation aspect of it. So if I suppose, could a member ask residents how they would spend the money? Possibly, but I wouldn't really think that would be as meaningful. I mean, it's putting power back into the hands of the people in a way. And are we not trusting politicians? No. I could throw it back and say, well, we could trust people to know what's best in their neighbourhoods.
But going back to something that Councillor Chadder said, I think she quoted the 2% of residents. Does it really justify? Does it really justify the means? I appreciate, don't get me wrong, I don't disagree with what the work that PPP does, because actually it makes a difference in those residents' lives. Yes, as an elected member, I am part of that process because we're mandated to be, but we're not delivering for our residents, we're delivering with our residents. There's a difference. We're part of the conversations. We're not the decision makers in that space, and it's been made very clear through the audit process that that's not that case. So I guess the question is does the 2% qualify the amount of money that's being spent, and can that not be spent in a better way through the elected process that we have?
I mean, there are all loads of different things that we could do to try and activate community and to build community participation and power. And so this is not as Councillor McLean said, shouldn't, and as you said, shouldn't be treated as a sacred cow. I think when we think about the outcomes of it, it's not. I think the 10,000 is very impressive, by the way. I think in the discussions the team have with other places, that level of reach. I know it's 2%, but it's a lot more. It's a kind of significant bit of engagement and involvement. And I don't think. I think we should see the 10,000 as quite a substantial achievement over time. But I also think the outcomes are very much about the other kinds of participation. So the numbers of people in the community are submitting projects, involved in projects in different ways. So I think that reach goes well beyond the 10,000 people who come and participate just in the kind of the choosing process.
Chair, if you don't.
Right.
Go on.
I am seeing 3 members now with less than 10 minutes. So you'll have to choose your most important questions. No commenting stand questions. Right. You finish, Councillor Parkway.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree with what you're saying. But what we're not talking about here is the cost that is incurred to the council to ensure that these projects happen. Yes. So let me give you an example. A wasted space in a garden or in what was a playground that goes through a bureaucratic process of changing planning permission that takes 16 to 18 months. and a project not being delivered, but yet still has been given the money for, that sat on, hasn't delivered anything for the community. We then go into another cycle and that's still not delivered. What we're not hearing in this space is the wasted time, money, effort that has happened that we don't seem to be accounting for. And so I'll ask the question again, because if it was an elected member in the space, they would be able to say, can't get planning permission for that space, I'm really sorry. Or actually that's owned by housing over here in HA, and actually it's over here that you need to be in this space. The process could maybe be tightened, or there's an opportunity to, that would then stop the wasted time, effort and money that takes place in the whole process. So I guess that's
right, and I think a lot has been done in the last most recent wave to really tighten up. Sardi, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
We've definitely got better processes in place. If we can see that there's a bit of an issue, we do pause projects and look into why and how we can speed up processes. We're certainly working more closely across the council with different directorates. We work really closely with our EST colleagues, our youth empowerment teams across the organisation. So that's really unlocked projects and how they can work with our residents and the speed in which they're delivered. But there are always going to be a few casualties, and I think the one that you're talking about is one of the tricky ones, to be honest. But it still happens.
Okay. Thank you. And so we have 3 members. Only one question and 1 minute each. Garfield, then we have Masters and Councillor Charlotte. Right, that's it.
Hot button round. How much money does the council spend on local elections every 4 years?
Every 4 years?
Yeah.
We'd have to come back to you on that.
Would you? Okay. You haven't got a round ballpark figure? How much does an election cost?
I can probably try and find it out, but I don't know. I don't want to guess the figure and think, well, I'm afraid it's not.
You know the answer.
So let's assume it's a large quantity of money. I would argue, to your point, Jason, that when 30%, and 30% isn't the best turnout, but it's better than 2%, when 30% of the borough turn out to elect councillors and elect the mayor, after the council has spent a considerable amount of money to ensure that they can do so, for them to then be usurped by 2% of the population who have the time and the resources to attend these meetings and take decisions, the agency is actually being robbed of the people who turn out to elect councillors who they trust in a representative democracy to take these strategic decisions and spend money wisely. If it costs a third of an officer's time in the library or in the neighbourhoods team throughout the year to administer this programme, it costs a third of their salary to spend the money. And that's the cost that we're not factoring in, which is doing 2 things that is a concern to this committee. It's costing money to spend money and creating an elongated bureaucratic process. And it's robbing people who vote in a local election of the agency to entrust Councillor McLean to take the decision, when she instead passes it off to 2% of the population to take that decision. I don't think that is a system we should praise. And the process in and of itself, creating the participation you talk about.
Make a speech. I give you a question.
Okay. I'll end it with a question. Why is the success of the process that you talk of the end in and of itself? Surely the success of the process, the success of the whole programme should be the projects it's delivered, not how many people took part in the decision to deliver the project.
No, I don't think. I think the primary strategic goal of this work is about community power and community participation. That is, the projects, we want to absolutely maximise the outcomes, whether it's a youth safety project or a diabetes or a greening, and the cumulative impact of all of those is obviously really important. But those are not the strategic intent of the programme. The strategic intent is around community power and community participation. And I think the other question is more of a political one, which...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, Councillor Garfield, if you've managed to read the over 250 pages that was part of the Cabinet report, which included the theory of change, the evaluation and about the projects, and that will give you the information about exactly what the programme is about. So it's not just about the numbers. And admittedly, for an election, everybody gets a bit of paper through their door to say, go and vote. Not everybody does. But what actually People Power Places doesn't go out to everybody like that. And actually, we've got quite good figures, but we won't dwell on the figures because it's more about figures. It's more about the outcomes and the outputs from this programme. And yeah, I can give lots of wonderful examples of projects of how people have got involved in their communities and have progressed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We must move on. Colleagues, we always start with the best of intentions in terms of our time. Then we get carried away. So if we're going to finish by 7, we must. So it's going to be Councillor Masters. Now, question. Sorry, Conrad.
It was just a factual answer to Councillor Garfield's earlier question.
Brilliant.
The cost of running an election, a whole election, is somewhere in the region of between £800,000 and £900,000 each time.
Thank you, Conrad.
Yeah. Thank you. So that was a
4
quick
times the value given
response.
to a community neighbourhood.
Councillor Masters, one question.
No, I just don't quite know where we are on resident participation, because on the one hand, you know, we've powered into a new cycle of people-powered places with no real debate about it, going in the face of everything we're meant to be sort of doing to address our new financial landscape. But by the same token, I read in today's Cabinet papers that we're looking to sort of pause the citizens' assembly process. So to me, it just feels we need to pause and we need to review, which I think was one of our Budget Working Party recommendations, and I'm sticking with that.
Thank you. And Councillor Charlotte.
I'm looking at the Newham Statement of Community Involvement and its reference to neighbourhood seal. There's nothing in there that stops you consulting in a different way. There's no legal impediment to this, is there, to change it?
There's a requirement around consultation, and how you do it is dependent on.
But you can frame consultations in many ways. And again, going back to the budget strategic recommendations, we recommended last year, probably the year before that, and again this year, that actually this council does not have a clear understanding of resident engagement or participation or consultation, which is why we sometimes end up in the messes that we do. I would also just say, you've referred Councillor Garfield to the theory of change. Looking at the theory of change, what was really noticeable about all of this is it's numerical. There is no qualitative data that you're seeking from here. So how do you know if residents are even happy, even of the 2% that do turn up?
I wanted to raise a point about this, because this comes back to the figures where it's people marking their own homework. It's people involved in the process. 85% of people involved in the process were happy to be involved in the process. Well, of course they are. If they weren't, they'd have disappeared off. And it's the ones who've disappeared off that we're kind of missing.
Okay, you've not got your point in, which you shouldn't have, got the cross council must.
No, it's part of it built on what Rita was saying. Sorry, Councillor Charles.
Okay, right, Councillor Charles is still at the floor.
So, I mean, I think, you know, the issue around we don't know what we don't know. And I'm actually thinking about it now and reflecting on hearing what you've said as well. What we're hearing about this and what we're reading about this don't quite match up. And I don't know where the disconnect is coming from, because we're hearing this is a wonderful all-singing project. We're accepting that there are shortfalls. And let's be very clear. We're not saying it isn't good for those 2% of people that get involved. This isn't a criticism of any individual. But the point is, in this moment, there is nothing to stop us doing more with this money, still consulting and engaging with people, but doing it in a very different way. And I think it's really, you know, it's up to us how we shape some recommendations that help you on your journey. And I think also, final point I'd make is that if you read all of these papers and the evaluation report, the first evaluation report was the only independent evaluation report. Yeah. The rest are all done internally. Every single one of those reports reads as if you're going to a destination, but none of them actually say where you're going to end up. What does success look like for people-powered places? Or do you have a percentage of the population that you do want to reach? Wigan has much higher and better figures than we do. Lots of local authorities up north have much better figures. Same deprivation indices. So I think, you know, there is a lot of work to be done. We can't carry on in the same way. And that's what this whole call-in's about.
Thank you for summing that up. And now, I need to ask a question in terms of the logistics and the fact that we're here. We're here now, there's two things. Scoring, which would have been hard, but we're hearing it now this week because we need to hear it before council pass the budget. Now, Conrad, you said when we spoke sometime last week, but this has budgetary implications. Depends on what happens tonight. And I don't know what the recommendations are going to be as yet. But if members decided to uphold the call in and make recommendations, I suppose they might and may not have budgetary implications. But if they do, and the executive does decide to agree with the recommendation, what happens?
Okay, so let me take that question. That's the reason why we arranged the timing as we did, and I'm grateful to everyone for sort of flexing to accommodate that. Following the evidence that you've heard, you will now form recommendations or not as you choose, and the executive has set time aside and scheduled a cabinet meeting for the 24th of February to consider those. They may, of course, not agree with those recommendations, in which case the budget is unchanged. But there are changes that could arise from that in the most extreme case. If you were to recommend going to the extreme, the immediate cessation of the programme and no further expenditure on the money until some other purpose was determined, and the executive then agreed with that, the budget going to council would then be changed, in effect, to reduce that 800,000 a year figure going into it. So practically, we have, if you like, sort of worked up the areas of the budget and all the underpinning spreadsheets that would need to be changed to effect such a change or any variation of it, just as we have also done on the second calling to be heard tonight. So that in the event that you made such a recommendation and that the executive then agreed with that and amended the proposed budget, we would issue revised papers for council. Realistically, that would have to be on the 25th or perhaps more likely the 26th of February. I think one appreciates that on the face of it would give some members of council a little difficulty in sort of receiving an amendment at such short notice. Having said that, I think the changes would be largely points of detail. So if you take the example I've just given, it might be that 20 references in the report would need to change, but actually be very apparent for all concerned that what has happened is this programme has been removed from it and we've just made various consequential adjustments to budget tables and so on. So I think practically in those circumstances, we could certainly manage getting out information to enable council to hold a reasonable and plausible meeting on the 27th. Obviously, that depends on the outcome of your deliberations and cabinet's deliberations.
Okay, thanks, Conrad. Constantly.
I just had a point of clarification, Chair. So I don't quite understand how it would affect the figures within the budget, as per se, with it coming from neighbourhood seal rather than the general fund. But I mean, it might just be me.
I mean, the point is that the funds could, in theory, be rediverted to other programmes, and that therefore there would be consequential knock-ons to sort of capital financing and other calculations. Certainly, as a very minimum. And again, I'm simply illustrating the most extreme example to make the point. It depends what the recommendations are. The budget, as currently drafted, includes spending money on this programme, funded by NSIL, but nonetheless still part of the budget and policy framework, which is what council agrees. So in the event there is a decision not to do that, the budget will have to be amended, at least in that respect, to make sure that such expenditure is no longer within the budget and policy framework, regardless of the source of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. What we are going to be doing now that we've heard from both sides, and we would deliberate, and at the start of the deliberation, we, as I said before, we would decide whether to take no further action or to come up with recommendations, which we will present to yourselves. I suppose within the first 5 minutes or so, we would then make that determination. So if witnesses would leave us for that time, and we will then make that determination. And
Well, you want us to stay around?
no, yes, just outside. Because we need to deliberate.
Yeah,
Do you need
done
them?
it.
Yeah, we need to deliberate. It would just take us about 5 minutes to determine whether we are going to uphold this or I'm not.
And then what's the process?
And if we're going to uphold this, we will then go into the full deliberation with the recommendation, and then you may go, you get it tomorrow.
But technically, I could like log onto YouTube, right? Or what if know what's happening? Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, just not to get into deliberation time. I'm going to prepare the other officers to come down at 10:30, is that okay?
Pardon?
Prepare the other officers to come down at 10:30. Okay, will
Yes,
somebody
but,
just text me?
Yes,
I need to.
but yourselves don't need to go.
I was just wondering, did you want
Yeah.
to stay for technical advice?
The statutory officers don't need to go at this stage now. Right. You all got co-opted in the scrutiny lab.
Don't mind being
Yes,
co-opted.
and good man. And then,
Co-opted.
colleagues,
Are we still live?
We're still live. We're still live.
Can we pause, no? Can we pause?
we could pause now, but then this bit is just to make the decide whether we have earned enough to make a decision either way. Have we earned enough? Because we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So we are going to uphold.
we're going to uphold, yes.
Okay, does that agree to
I
everyone?
didn't hear the top of the table, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
The question is, we can resolve to take no further action, or we can decide that we are going to uphold the call in and then now revert to a recommendation. What say you?
Chair, we would be failing in our duty if we didn't uphold this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Here.
So, and so that seems to be the consensus. Okay, thank you. So we are going to communicate. Can you do us the honors of letting the witnesses know that we are going to be upholding this call-in? So we're going into recommendation stage now. Yeah, they can do.
Chair,
Yes.
are we permitted to outline further concerns in addition to what was outlined for the call-in following the evidence we've heard?
But yeah, this is the thing we can expand now, because based on the evidence, this way the recommendation, a commentary or recital, everything could be.
Chair, are we doing that with the live stream still running? or
No,